You know, I should really remember the line lyrics to my bloody end credit song. Oh. This could be a problem. So, with a new episode comes a sexy new backdrop. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a Limp Bizkit poster, which I'm blocking so you won't really be able to see it anyway, and then there's plenty of games, because I couldn't possibly sell the fact that I'm a game reviewer if I didn't showcase games like Silent Hill 3, or Fear, or Shadow the Hedgehog, and have an anime of Black Lagoon just sitting up there for some reason. Grand Theft Auto 3, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, getting back onto the main point, of course, if there was ever a game in the early 2000s era of gaming that defined my childhood, Grand Theft Auto 3 is the game that immediately springs to mind. In an era that was defined by games such as Halo Combat Evolved and platformers crossbreeding with the third-person shooter genre, Grand Theft Auto arose from its 2D race and chase origins on the PlayStation and decided to take things to the next level by making the jump to 3D. Of course, while games such as Urban Chaos for the Dreamcast will be where open-world 3D games truly started gaining ground, for me, it's Grand Theft Auto 3 which I'd say is definitely the game that popularized the genre, especially given its influence throughout the 2000s, and honestly, I'd argue that its influence is still quite prevalent to this day. And back in 2004, this game, alongside Sonic Heroes and Ratchet & Clank 3, were my top 3 reasons for picking up a PlayStation 2 back then. Admittedly though, I did play this game at an age where I probably shouldn't have. Well, I'd say I was probably 10 years too young to play this game now that I think about it. But nevertheless, this game in particular does hold a special place in my heart. Whether I be over at a mate's house, or just playing the game with my family, or the countless nights that I spent rampaging across Liberty City to the hyperactive drum and bass of MSX FM, Grand Theft Auto 3 is a game that I can unabashedly say is one of my favourite games of all time. And while I haven't played the PS1 era Grand Theft Auto games, I do hope to get around to them at some stage, but for now, assuming of course I ever get to the likes of Vice City or San Andreas, this is where I'm going to be starting in terms of the Grand Theft Auto series. Not too much development history for me to really get into as far as Grand Theft Auto 3 is concerned, as it was really just a simple conversion from 2D to 3D, with DMA Design's aims for this game to be a cross between The Sopranos and The Legend of Zelda in terms of its gameplay. However, while there isn't much development history to speak of, there are a few things that I would like to mention, namely the changes that came in the wake of 9/11. Whether it be basic stuff like texture changes on the police cars, or even the alternate covers for the games being scrapped, there are 2 characters and a few select missions that were removed from the game, which is pretty interesting. As for the characters, there was a character known as Kurtley whose purpose and role was completely unknown and was likely cut out of the game early on. But more infamously, there was a character known as Darkel. Darkel was a homeless transient who, based on the elements that are left in the final game, such as the newspaper article about tramp attacks on the rise, and the remnants of Darkel's gang beneath the Callahan Bridge, it is believed that Darkel's missions would have entailed some, rather explosive antics. And given the fact that this game came out in 2001, this would have been a pretty big no-no. Even bigger of a no-no would be one of the rumoured missions of the game, being one in which Darkel would give you a mission where you must destroy a school bus full of children. DMA Design would later claim that Darkel wasn't removed because of the 2001 terrorist attacks, but instead because he didn't totally fit within the dour, depressing framework of Grand Theft Auto 3's story. But personally, I find that a little hard to believe. I mean, given that Grand Theft Auto 3 had earned its reputation as being one of the most violent video games since Mortal Kombat or Doom, and was often demonized by figures in the media such as this,
and I firmly believe that these awful, horrible, violent video games are offensive to our most basic values.
Plus, DMA Design's already pretty heavy content that's packed into the game as is, I sincerely doubt that they will be so self-censoring over something like killing NPC children, especially since these are the same guys who would later make Manhunt for the PlayStation 2. Not to mention, the removal of school buses from the game itself does seem a little suspect to me. I don't know, maybe I'm just letting my brain wander here, but I get the impression that the publishers might have twisted DMA Design's arm here, considering the rather recent events that happened in 2001. Another infamous mission cut out from the game was a Dark Hell mission titled Love Hurts. The mission would have entailed you learning how to fly a plane called the Dodo, and it would involve you flying the plane into the Love Media building. Yeah, I think you can see why this was removed. But even despite this, I am barely scratching the surface here in terms of cut content from Grand Theft Auto 3, and especially in this day and age of DLC and HD remakes, I'm honestly surprised we never got a special edition of Grand Theft Auto 3 that brings this stuff back. I don't know, I suppose the last thing to really mention about the graphics is the game looking significantly more colourful in its early beta stages compared to the more muted and grey tones of the final game. Kinda reminds me of a Dreamcast game now that I think about it. In fact... But anyway, conspiracy aside, on the 22nd of October 2001, Grand Theft Auto 3 took the world by storm, and holy fuck, did this game make its mark on the video game landscape. I could wax nostalgia about this game all day, but let's get into the story. So our plot kicks off with a bank heist, where our trio, comprised of Miguel, Catalina, and her boyfriend/protagonist Claude, making a mad dash for their car to escape from the police. So naturally, things go off without a hitch.
Sorry, babe. I'm an ambitious girl. You're just small time.
With Catalina and Miguel escaping and Claude being arrested, he's sent to prison while a radio broadcast informs the player about a devastating attack on a police convoy, which resulted in the destruction of the Callahan Bridge. We then see the results of the radio broadcast as the convoy is attacked by members of the Colombian cartel, holding the coppers at gunpoint as they extract an old Oriental gentleman from the convoy. Luckily for Claude, however, this gives him a prime opportunity to escape, as he does by casually kicking down the cop and stealing the handcuff keys. Well, fuck, man, I never thought escaping from the cops would be so easy. In fact, I'm gonna try it myself. Hello? During this exchange, he helps out 8-Ball by unlocking his cuffs right before escaping from an explosion that destroys the Callahan Bridge. After clearing out of the blast zone and getting a change of clothes, 8-Ball takes Claude to see Luigi, a pimp who, thanks to 8-Ball's good word, gets Claude some work as he helps out his little prostitution outlet. From this point on, the story of Grand Theft Auto 3 is a little bit loosey-goosey in terms of how you progress in the story, so for the sake of being a little bit more concise with this plot summary, I'm gonna be summarizing the story missions that are most important to the story, because in the case of this game and how open world it is, some missions are going to be a little bit more relevant to the main plot than others. So as a result of this, and at the risk of skimming through the story segment here, I'm only going to be covering the missions that are the most relevant to the overarching story of the game. After doing a few jobs for Luigi, this then leads him towards Joey Leone and Tony Cipriani, close associates of the Italian Mafia, and the former of which being the son of the Don. Once Claude manages to network himself within the Mafia, he's eventually taken in to meet the man himself, Don Salvatore Leone. While under Salvatore's payroll, Claude is then introduced to Maria Lattori, Salvatore's trophy wife, and half the reason why things from this point on go pear-shaped. The two get very briefly acquainted, and yes, I do mean very briefly acquainted. But even despite all this, Maria does speak positively about Claude, about how he treats her right. While Claude's working for Salvatore, one mission involves him tailing a squealer named Curly Bob, who, as it turns out, is a snitch for the Colombian cartel who are pushing a drug on the street called Spank through Portland Harbor. Interestingly enough, however, the people who Bob's leaking information to are Catalina and Miguel. With this in mind, Claude teams up with 8-Ball again, as Salvatore wants the Colombian tanker destroyed to eliminate the supply of Spank being flooded into the city. 8-Ball successfully manages to blow up the tanker, and Claude returns to Salvatore ready to celebrate a job well done, but it turns out he has one job left to do: dispose of some evidence in a bloodied car. That is, until he's contacted by Pager. There's that early 2000s nostalgia kicking in. Yeah, a little footnote for the kiddies watching at home. In a day and age before your cell phones could practically do everything except call people, this was pretty much how people texted way back when. Anyway, the caller is Maria Lattori, who warns Claude about how Salvatore has set a trap for him by rigging the car to explode, and how instead he should meet her by the dock near the Callahan Bridge. Upon arriving, Maria blurts out that she told Salvatore that she and Claude were an item, and because of that, the paranoid Mafia Don has offered Claude's corpse to the Colombian cartel.
It's all my fault because I told him we were an item. Don't ask me why, I don't know.
You stupid woman. So, Let's reiterate. Not only has our goodwill towards the Italian Mafia been sullied by something that isn't even true, but in addition, all of our problems from this point on are all because of Maria's callousness in the face of somebody who, she knows for a pretty damn good fact, is the boss of the fucking Mafia!
I mean, I can understand the psychology of how Maria's scared by all the bloodshed she's likely witnessed in the background of all of Salvatore's schemes and all that, but you'd think that a better written reason for Salvatore wanting her and Claude dead would be for him to assume that Maria and him had a relationship of some kind, rather than just having Maria blurt out that she's been fucking Claude like a complete dunce.
Not to mention, the way in which Salvatore could find out about Maria's little affair could be quite easily explained by an in-game radio call she makes to Chatterbox FM.
You see, okay, I had this boyfriend, and at first, he was real kind to me. He was a real gentleman, a little bit older and everything, but, he treated me really good. And then it all went wrong, and so, I found someone else, and he seems real nice, but, he don't talk too much, so I really can't tell if he likes me, and, well, I guess what I want to know is, how do you tell if a guy is serious? I mean, he treats me good, but he don't seem real interested in me. He's always working and hanging out with the guys. Say, you don't think he's like you, do you?
What do you mean like me? What are you insinuating? That he's on the radio? Well, probably not.
See? Now not only do you not have to compromise by having your characters be idiots, but in addition you get a nice bit of in-game continuity, plus the fact that it explains why Salvatore would even consider killing Claude.
Anyway, standing next to Maria is Asuka Carson, a friend of hers who takes Claude and Maria to Staunton Island, deep into the Yakuza territory where, as you'd expect, Asuka is their leader. As a test of loyalty to the Yakuza, Asuka orders Claude to assassinate Salvatore to truly break his ties with the Mafia. From this point forth, we're working for the Japanese Yakuza, with our missions now coming from Asuka, Kenji, Rei. We would have been getting missions from Shinji, but he just wouldn't get in the damn robot. Anyway, the story picks up again during one of Donald Love's missions, where Claude tracks down the Colombian cartel's little hideouts in the Pan-Atlantic construction site, where he runs into Miguel and Catalina. With Claude holding the two at gunpoint, Miguel begs for his life before Catalina betrays him, shooting the bastard in the leg before tapping into her inner trinity and jumping off the building. As luck would have it, Asuka manages to catch up with Claude and confronts Miguel about how the Colombian cartel had killed Kenji, vowing to exterminate them all.
Yeah, about that.
Yeah, to spoil a little bit here, the one who actually killed Kenji was, Claude, under orders by Donald Love. But the weirdest thing about this is, Asuka never finds this out. Anyway, after interrogating Miguel, Asuka reveals to Claude that Catalina has been pushing Spank throughout the espresso vendors.
I was wondering why this morning's coffee tasted a little bit more fantastic than usual.
Claude destroys the coffee vendors and returns to find Asuka and Maria, who've extracted some information out of Miguel that Catalina is expecting a plane set to drop off some more of her drugs. Claude then destroys the plane and collects the Spank, successfully stopping Catalina's drug ring once and for all. However, returning to the construction site, Claude finds Asuka and Miguel dead on the floor, with a note left behind revealing that Catalina has Maria held hostage and ransoms her for $500,000 dues. Claude hands over the money, of course, but like the backstabbing snake that she is, Catalina takes to the skies as she hauls Maria into a chopper, with Claude in hot pursuit. Claude chases Catalina down to the dam, where after fighting her way through her goons, armed to the teeth with basically every weapon in the game, Claude finally gets his vengeance on her as he shoots down Catalina in a glorious explosion as her fiery carcass rains upon Liberty City. With Catalina dead and the Colombian cartel out of action, Claude saves Maria, and thus the two live happily ever...
This one cost me $50.
Whoa.
Overall, the plot of Grand Theft Auto 3 is actually a pretty simple story. Guy gets betrayed by his girlfriend, guy gets cold-blooded revenge, simple, gritty, and just how I like my Grand Theft Auto stories. Admittedly though, there are a few things about the plot that does bother me. For one thing, we really don't get much in the way of consequences for Claude's actions. I mean, you'd think that him having killed Salvatore would have given Joey, or at the very least the more vindictive Tony Cipriani, reason enough to go after Claude for what he's done, but ultimately, nothing ever comes from this. The same thing can also be said for how Asuka never finds out that it was actually Claude who killed Kenji, rather than the Colombian cartel. Not only that, but given how Catalina is portrayed as a manipulative witch, you'd think that at some point she would realize that she could use all this bad blood to her advantage and unite the Colombian cartel, the Triads, the Yakuza, and the Italian Mafia to hunt down and kill Claude. I mean, think about it. Claude has already dealt enough damage to all their organizations in some way or another, so I'm pretty damn sure that they'd set their differences aside so they could eliminate the one man who's managed to screw them all over. Not to mention, it'd make Claude all the more badass for having fought off all of Liberty City's criminal underworld and defeating them all single-handedly. But, I don't know. All that aside, Grand Theft Auto 3's plot, while not exactly Shakespeare, it's definitely the kind of game that works in its simplicity. Over to the gameplay side of things, Claude's moveset handles pretty decently for the most part, but there are a few archaic trappings here and there that some people might find a tad annoying. You can move Claude with the analog stick, jump with the square button, punch and fire your weapon with the circle button, and use the triangle button to enter and exit vehicles. As far as the shoulder buttons are concerned, you can hold R1 to have some weapons such as the pistol, Uzi and shotgun lock onto your target, or with other weapons like the sniper rifle and rocket launcher, enter into an aiming reticle for precise accuracy. And of course, the L2 and R2 buttons allow you to cycle through your vast array of weapons. Driving controls are also pretty easy to get accustomed to. X to accelerate, left analog stick to move, and of course the square button to brake and reverse. These controls are pretty much stock standard for most vehicles in the game, whether it be cars, boats, or whatever, although there are some key differences that give them their own unique spin here and there. For example, some boats have guns which can be fired by pressing the circle button, however, this is usually only safe for specific missions. Although, one critique that I do have for the vehicles in terms of their handling is sometimes they tend to control like bathtubs on wheels, and while realistic, it can get aggravating in some instances. In addition, Claude can also obtain armor, health, and a sparsely used narcotic drug that sends Claude into a Matrix-style focus mode, which slows down the flow of time, which are usually represented by a heart, a shield, and a pill icon that are dotted around Liberty City. But Claude's abilities are only half of what Grand Theft Auto 3 has to offer, as the game holds so much more to do outside of the main missions. Whether you be on a murderous rampage, partaking in street races, or even delivering rare vehicles for quick cash. And that's not even accounting for what happens when the player decides to stray off the beaten path, as given what most players usually did with Grand Theft Auto 3 in 2001, it was usually just to screw around in the hub world, killing people, driving recklessly, and essentially doing all the dangerous activities that a young man should do in his prime. In terms of mission structure, the open world nature of Grand Theft Auto 3, plus the nature of Claude's role as a criminal psychopath, leaves him open to a vast array of employers, and as expected, people who need to be killed. As a result of this, you're free to pick and choose whichever missions you want to do, however, some will be a little bit more pertinent to the main story than others, so keep that in mind if you're thinking of killing Kenji. Overall, Grand Theft Auto 3's gameplay remains fairly solid 16 years on, and I think it's quite easy to see why the formula has stood the test of time since 2001, up until this very day given the franchise's popularity. And while to some Grand Theft Auto 3 might feel a tad barren compared to what came later in the series, I do still think that this game delivers a concise experience worthy of the franchise's name, especially given that all the games from the 3D and HD eras of the series owe to Grand Theft Auto 3 for its successful formula. Over to the technical aspects, graphically, Grand Theft Auto 3 has aged. Quite a lot actually. That being said though, while its age is mostly reflected in its character models, I do still think that the other aesthetics such as the urban grunge and the dominating grey colour scheme do a pretty decent job of setting the atmosphere for the game. Which is also something that I really like about Grand Theft Auto 3 compared to the sequels, is that it's got a great sense of unfriendliness brought out in the attitudes of Liberty City's people, in how everything here feels very lived in and, for the lack of a better phrase, kind of cruel. In fact, adding to the atmosphere of the game is the sound design, and I'm not just talking specifically about the radio stations you can listen to in-game, but during the missions, there is no music, and I don't know, there's just something about it that makes it so much more impactful, especially given that there's a real big echo effect on a lot of the sound effects put into the game. I mean, whether you're blasting your gun or hearing distant screams of panicking citizens, in Grand Theft Auto 3, it's a combination of the visuals and sound design that makes this game feel incredibly visceral, but done in a very subtle way. In terms of the game's soundtrack, the game has a vast array of radio stations you can tune into via the radio, whether it be Head Radio's pop tunes, Flashback FM's 80s hits, to Rise FM's techno tunes. There is plenty to choose from, and your soundtrack is pretty varied when you're on a rampage in your murdermobile. But not only that, there's also a talk show in this game called Chatterbox FM, hosted by real-life radio DJ Laszlo. And holy fuck do I have some fun memories of driving around Liberty City laughing at the lunatics who called in, plus the plethora of early 2000s satire delivered all with a snarky retort from Laszlo. That being said though, if you want a big dose of comedy in a game that's mostly pretty straight-faced about its revenge plot, then you listen to Chatterbox FM. Although to me it's a bit of a catch-22 having Chatterbox FM, because I feel in having this station, we lost out on a pretty cool rock and metal station, which given the amount of pop, rap and techno in this game, you'd think that rock music, or at the very least heavy metal music, would have been on the checklist of stations to put into the game. However, without a rock station, it forced me to listen to my favourite radio station in this game, MSX FM.
let me call happy MC. Don't you need quotation me? Bad boyfriend in your mouth, don't suck your teeth and I'm a mouse cigarette. Put on your ear, I'll do what I'm supposed to feel. Stand there, bumping your head down, what the time you have no dreadlock. Rastafari easy or a company. I'm the MC country, a jungle revolutionary. Thinking scientific, barrier like DVD.
I don't even know what the fuck he's saying, man, but this shit is dope!
Boys.
Seriously, dude, this is probably one of the best things I've ever listened to in my life. MSX FM 101.1 is the business!
And surprise, surprise, it's once again time to return another famous segment from my show, Skully's Fun Fact of the Week. It's good to be back. In the PC and Xbox versions of the game, there is actually the ability to have custom soundtracks, meaning that you can basically put in whatever tracks you want into the game itself and listen to those tunes while you're driving around in your car.
In terms of anything else to mention, it would be the use of a celebrity voice cast playing most of the Italian mafia that we meet in the game. The most memorable of which to me is Michael Madsen playing Tony Cipriani and Joe Pantoliano as Luigi. And as for the other voice actors, they also do a pretty decent job, and given the fact that we have trained actors on hand here, Grand Theft Auto 3 manages to avoid the whole stint of shoddy voice acting that seemed to plague a lot of video games from the early 2000s. But all that aside, Grand Theft Auto 3, while showing its age in some places, I still think holds up pretty well on a technical level.
So with all that out of the way, what are my final thoughts on Grand Theft Auto 3?
Overall, in spite of what some people might tout as their favourite Grand Theft Auto game, to me, this game is my favourite game in the series. And yes, to some, while it might be a bit barren, and I might admit nostalgia might play a little bit of a role in my enjoyment of GTA 3, but on the whole, I have just as much of a blast playing this game now as I did in my childhood. But even going beyond that, I love this game's atmosphere, and I think it's mostly because of that I'm able to better immerse myself in the game's criminal underworld. In terms of recommendations, if you want a more streamlined Grand Theft Auto experience with a plus a straight-up revenge plot with a fantastic sense of atmosphere, and a gameplay formula that's still as good now as it was in 2001, then I'd say that Grand Theft Auto 3 is a game that's definitely worth your time.
So on that note, I'm Skully, keep it new metal, and next time on Skully Reviews, considering that I'm usually known for reviewing action games and 3D platformers from the late 90s and early 2000s, this next game that I'm going to be reviewing next time might be a little bit of a shock to some people. Catch you later.